After that, the wise woman, or Hisama in Japanese, which means princess, and who is the elder of the village, rushes to the site. Then the wise woman tells the Tatari god, whose slimy stuff has come off and who has turned back into the giant wild boar, "O nameless god of rage and hate, I bow before you. A mound will be raised and funeral rites performed on this ground where you have fallen. Pass on in peace and bear us no hatred." Which means, we will make a large tomb at where your corpse lies and pray to your soul, so please do not curse us anymore. The tomb is kind of like an ancient Japanese tomb. She says she's gonna build it, so please do not curse us. Then the huge wild boar god who is about to die suddenly starts talking. "Disgusting little creatures, soon all of you will feel my hate and suffer as I have suffered." And it disintegrates. Ashitaka has no choice but to leave the village because he is cursed. So he cuts off his top knot. All the men in the village have top knots on their heads, but Ashitaka cuts it off. So Ashitaka uses that iron sword to cut off his top knot. The action indicates that he is no longer a member of the family, equals he can never come back home. And the wise woman explains why he has to do it. Here, please pay attention to the expression of the wise woman. She says, "There's evil at work in the land to the west. Prince Ashitaka, it's your fate to go there and see what you can see with eyes unclouded by hate. You may find a way to lift the curse." After hearing these words, Ashitaka decides to go west. At the same time, we are also somehow convinced, or should I say, deceived by them. Why does Ashitaka have to leave the village in the first place? And why is the wise woman trying to make Ashitaka go west? I mean, she's saying, you may find a way to break the curse, but I was thinking, how does she know that? That's the first important point of the movie. Ashitaka is cursed and his right arm is scarred. This poison will eventually reach the bones and kill him, so he travels west to escape death. We have been forced into thinking that's how this story goes just until now. But if that's the case, there's no need to exile him in the first place. Because the wise woman says, "We will make a tomb at where Tatari god died and pray for its soul." In this movie, there are many gods such as the god of dogs or wild boars, but none of them actually curses after death. All the gods who come out in the movies certainly have huge powers, and they're all big, but that's it. They can't use any supernatural power like telepathy. Well, only the forest spirit has this mysterious power, but there's no depiction that other gods have such thing. Then why is Ashitaka exiled? There's only one answer. It's because the wise woman wants to exile him. The reason why the wise woman talks to Ashitaka about the curse in such a poker face is because she's acting. Neither the villagers nor Ashitaka notice it, but there is an unspoken intention only in her mind. The real consequence of Ashitaka's curse is not that he dies, but he becomes another Tatari god. From this point, Ashitaka is slowly turning into a Tatari god. Just like the monster that has attacked the village a little while ago, his pain and suffering gradually becomes unbearable and he begins to curse his fate. The wild boar god who attacks the village also must have controlled the curse with his reason at first, but gradually becomes the Tatari god. In the same manner, Ashitaka is destined to be the next Tatari god. Later, in a battle, he shoots his arrow normally, but he shows a monstrous power, and the arrow tears off the opponent's samurai's both arms. When he shoots the next arrow, it easily chops off the opponent's head, which surprises Ashitaka himself. This is because at this point he's given a sacred power which is also cursed. The power of the curse invites Ashitaka to a suffering that leads to death, while the sacred power increases his strength infinitely. Also in Irontown, he carries wounded son and says, "Out of my way, I'm going." Then he pushes a huge wooden gate open with one hand, which usually requires dozens of people to open. Again, he does it with his cursed right hand. This means when Ashitaka feels anger or sadness darkness or something illogical, he gains infinite power. We only see scenes where Ashitaka manages to control and uses his infinite power at will and think that's all there is. But they definitely portray the process of Ashitaka gradually becoming a monster. In fact, the conflict of whether Ashitaka can survive as a human or become a Tatari god is another substructure that's hidden in the story. However, it is not very noticeable. After all, I think why people can't notice it is because the movie was titled Princess Mononoke, which made the piece look like a romance movie. But it's not a romance. It's a story about Ashitaka. It's really the legend of Ashitaka. Ashitaka has despair and anger in his mind, but on the surface, he shows no emotion and acts gently. And Miyazaki said that in this movie, he decided not to portray Ashitaka's inner despair and anger. Ashitaka's inner voices are not spoken through lines, unlike Dora in Castle in the Sky, who speaks to herself. This might be more convenient. As a result, the depiction of Ashitaka progressively becoming a monster is shown through pictures, but we somehow see that as a superhero using superpower. But that's not how it should be seen. There's a scene where Ashitaka bends the opponent's sword with just one finger, and at the end breaks it with his thumb and index finger. But that expression clearly shows how his anger goes out of control and becomes monstrous. At first, Ashitaka also calms down and controls his mind. Even when he's told rudely to leave the village, he just sighs and says, okay. But in the latter half of the movie, his power goes out of his control more and more when he becomes emotional. And the wise woman is the only person in the village who notices it. It is not the dead Tatari god that she is afraid of. It is Ashitaka who would one day lose human nature and turns into a Tatari god that she's most afraid of. That's why she thinks Ashitaka is a good boy and would have taken over our village and become a good king. But now he will become a monster because of the pain and resentment and the anger towards the absurdity that has descended upon him. Let's kick him out of the village before that happens. On top of that, the wise woman plans to send this young man who will become a Tatari god to the king of Yamato in the west, who imposed a curse on our village. Jomon people thought that curses were something that must be given back to someone. They called it imigaeshi, a type of retaliation. It was a rule between uncivilized tribes that if they received hatred from others, they would curse them back. This rule became more systematized during Heian era and was called Shikigami Gaeshi, or returning of fierce god. So the wise woman, with her perfect poker face, operates a retaliation against the country of Yamato in the west by sending Ashitaka as a strategic weapon. But neither Ashitaka nor the villagers are aware of this at all. So Ashitaka believes, if I go west, I may be able to remove the curse, and thinks, I have to prevent the village from further infection of the curse. Therefore, he doesn't realize that he is now the curse itself. Ashitaka doesn't know at this point that after a few weeks or months, he too becomes a Tatari god, has strange snake-like stuff clinging on his body, and attacks the country in the west. So you can see the true intentions in Princess Mononoke are hard to read because the movie does not clarify the thoughts or strategies of each individual, but is designed in a way that makes the viewer see the story only from Ashitaka's point of view.